This is Hannibal back here with a review of the RF Video Reflections interview with none other than the Honky Tonk Man, a guy that I'm very familiar with. This was the last interview he did before he went into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2019. He said that he was under a Neglastia contract at this point, which I don't know what exactly that pays. He explained in this interview it was something like they can put out like toys and shirts of him and stuff. And he gets a certain percentage of that. I don't know if there's any base pay or not. I don't know if since he's been in the Hall of Fame, I have heard he's under an actual Legends contract now, which I would imagine would be more money, especially now that they're signing people like DDP and Armando Estrada, who, by the way, Armando Estrada is not anywhere near Honky Tonk Man's status, but like they're signing people under these Legends contracts in WWE, I guess, to lock them up so they can't go to AEW or whatever, so AEW can't make stuff of them. But Honky Tonk Man, I think, is under a full Legends contract now. I would wonder how that would compare to, for instance, whatever contract AEW has Jake the Snake under, because we heard a bunch of hoopla back in March that Jake the Snake had re-signed with AEW. But I've seen Lance Archer wrestle at least a handful of times since then and I don't think Jake has done one appearance in AEW since he's been re-signed. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I've seen he's done a couple spoken words tour things and autographs, which he does himself, which I think AEW people can do their own thing. Anyways, my point is, I wonder what AEW pays guys like Jake Roberts to just be under contract and not work, similar to what WWE does with these legends. But it seems like WWE actually puts stuff out with their legend contract people and makes better use of them than AEW at this point anyways. I don't know if AEW has fan conventions or not. I assume they must. But anyways, I don't want to digress too much. Let's get into this interview. It was clear in this interview that I don't think he was under any type of WWE contract during the interviews and time that I knew him. He had made a couple WWE appearances when he was doing Great North Wrestling matches. I know at one point when Santino almost broke his record that he did a couple appearances for WWE, and he was still doing the indies, but I think those were just one-offs. It's sad that Gunther broke his record, because to me, when Honky Tonk Man was Intercontinental Champion, he was there was A, B, and C shows pretty much every night, almost every night. The A and B shows would be at big arenas. And on one of those shows, we'd have Hogan against somebody or Warrior against someone, and on the other, it'd be sometimes Macho against Honky, Macho against Brutus, Rhythm and Blues against the Hart Foundation. And like, they actually drew fairly good crowds. So Honky Tonk Man, when he was Intercontinental Champion, like was headlining shows at big arenas. And they were drawn based a lot off the strength of the title, where I don't know how many defenses Gunther actually has. I know they hardly have any house shows anymore. And I don't remember any like him headlining any house shows when he was Intercontinental Champion. And he didn't win it in a memorable way or lose it in a memorable way. Everyone remembers how Honky Tonk Man lost his Intercontinental title. But anyways, it was clear in this interview that Honky Tonk Man wanted to be in the Hall of Fame, and I don't blame him. As he even mentioned in this interview, it helps with his bookings and like to say you're a WWE Hall of Famer and stuff. He seemed to be in like kind of apologetic mode, and as he said, a kindler, gentler Honky Tonk Man. And he did also explain in this that he doesn't like doing shoot interviews as much because he always gets in trouble, which I think is why he never did another one with me. Plus, now he's probably under a Legends contract and he might not be able to. But I do remember when I was in Phoenix for a month during the pandemic, hanging out with guys like Tank Abbott, Ken Shamrock, Don Fry, the guy from the Adam Sandler movies that was at Don Fry's house when I was there that I forget his name. And Mark Kerr. I tried to get in contact with the Honky Tonk Man, and he didn't want to do an interview. So I figure it must be because of whatever deal he has, or he doesn't want to rock the boats. He told a couple stories in this that I didn't know about. That the reason why he was ultimately let go of WWE commentary was because he no-showed a commentary gig at Madison Square Garden. And I guess he also talked in great detail, which I'd never heard this story before, about refusing to job to Macho Man and then walking out on WWE because they wanted to change him into a face at one point. So I could understand. I was never obviously wrestling 7 days a week and dealing with the grind like him, but I have dealt with backstage politics and stuff, and I can understand how that could get you, plus the grind, why he may have walked out. And yeah, it's interesting. That probably had a lot to do with why it took so long to put him in the Hall of Fame, because they do tend to hold grudges about those type of things. It's interesting though, even though he did supposedly walk out when he was commentating during like that early 90s period, when he was really over as a commentator, they still brought him back for that rockabilly era when he did commentary again. One thing I would like to ask Honky Tonk Man about the Disco Inferno, I've heard talk about, was that Disco Inferno claimed he was supposed to be the rockabilly guy that was going to be with Honky Tonk Man, which would have made a lot more sense and would have been a better fit. I also remember on house shows, they didn't send Honky Tonk Man, at least on the one that I saw with Rockabilly, it was just Rockabilly against actually a local jobber. They brought a local jobber in on a house show, which you rarely see. Maybe someone no-showed or something. I really don't know, but I remember thinking it was weird that a local independent guy was wrestling Rockabilly on a house show I saw around the time Honky Tonk Man was with him, which they both said was the worst. Honky Tonk Man said it was the worst gimmicks of their career, and that was a terrible gimmick. Honky Tonk Man did seem to indicate that Jerry Lawler had some heat with him at that time or something. Was kind of jealous that he didn't say it in this interview, but in the past he was indicating Jerry Lawler heat. That may have had something to do with why his run wasn't as good in those days. He didn't go into WCW too much in this time. The only thing he mentioned was that he could have had an opportunity to go to WCW during the time Jim Barnett was working in WCW, around the time he was doing color commentary. And one interesting thing that, and I'll bring this up again, I don't know if I've ever brought this up, that I've never asked Honky Tonk Man about, but this reminds me about it now. Back in 1991, August of 1991, I've mentioned a couple times there used to be wrestling matches at the fair that comes here that used to come here to Ottawa. It doesn't come anymore. The Ottawa Civic Center. It was called World Championship Wrestling in August 1991. World Championship Wrestling came here with Honky Tonk Man, and Rick Rude was on the card. The Angel of Death was on the card. So I don't know who actually ran it, but they called it World Championship Wrestling, but it wasn't actually WCW. And I remember everyone that went to it thought it was WCW, but other than some name guys, it was all jobbers. So I wish I could ask Honky Tonk Man about that, because that would have been around the time that both he and Rick Rude had kind of just been released. Of course, Rick Rude ended up in WCW. I think he was actually in WCW at that time. So if anyone knows that, there was a World Championship Wrestling card here, August 91, randomly. Honky Tonk. I think Jake Roberts may have been on it too. I'm not positive though. Could be wrong about that. No, Jake Roberts was not on it. I'd have to look up in my files who Rick Rude wrestled. But both Rick Rude and Honky Tonk Man wrestled other known guys, but for some reason I can't remember. But I won't digress. The other thing that there was a lot of comments on about this, and I never noticed this. I don't know anything about toupees, but people were wondering if the host that was doing interviews with them, who seems like a nice enough guy, I met him in the Billy Jack Hayes interview where we had a little altercation, but I never noticed whether he had a toupee or not, but I have nothing against him. I just thought it was funny in the comments. People always say that about Vince McMahon too. And supposedly Bruno Sammartino wore a toupee. Okay, yeah, Tim is his name. Yeah, he seems like a nice guy, and apparently he's involved with putting on conventions. I've seen the Iron Claw movie, and I actually fell asleep twice watching it. I hated it. Honky Tonk Man does talk about the Ultimate Warrior in this positively. I haven't heard him really say anything bad about the Ultimate Warrior much ever. He does talk about here. Oh yeah, here's one thing we should bring up. That one of the clips that got a lot of hits was him saying that the main event, why people really tuned into WrestleMania 3 was Hogan versus Andre and not Macho Man versus Steamboat. Well, I agree with him on that. I mean, the smart marks and wrestling fans do like the Macho Man Steamboat match. But I remember, like, until people started saying it was the greatest, like one of the greatest matches ever, I don't remember ever thinking twice after watching it until like more recent years when people started putting it over. But I'm not a long match fan. I don't like long matches. I am a fan of Macho Man though, and I have nothing against Steamboat. But I do believe he was right. Like there was a good angle there with the belt to the throat, but obviously the reason why people came to that show was the Hogan Andre. Someone says Honky Tonk Man turned heel. You had to dial a number. The other thing he talks about in this, and I do agree that they wanted to bring him in as a babyface. And I guess he didn't practice being a babyface before he went in, even though I guess he was in Stampede Wrestling for a few months in between starting with WWE and finding out he was going to start. I do think that it could have actually worked as a babyface if done properly, but they didn't do it properly when they brought him in as a face. Obviously, I've seen him on Independence in later years where he's beloved as a babyface. He doesn't work as a heel on the Independence any of the time I've seen him on the Independence in the 2000s. And the fans love him. So obviously, maybe if they had done it differently, it could have worked as a babyface. Who knows? I really don't know. There was he really didn't want to be a babyface. That's one thing that's for sure. And he's a more natural heel. That's 100% for sure. He's not a natural babyface at all. I actually remember, and he could have just been kayfabing. One of my childhood friends, and I'll say his name. His name was Lou Dickinson. His father was also named Lou Dickinson. Played for the Ottawa Rough Riders. And in 1989, the father was able to get him backstage to meet Honky Tonk Man at a WWE show in Ottawa because he was a Rough Rider, and apparently he was very rude to the kid. So I guess he was a very good natural heel. Yeah, I don't know if you're talking about Hockey. Hockey's hair is real, from what I know. I have seen Honky Tonk Man wrestle many, many, many times. He wrestled in my company, Great North Wrestling, many times. For one thing, between 2000, and especially in 2007, 2008, the last time he wrestled for me was 2015. But I saw him in WWE many times, and that one random time on that show that they called WCW. And yeah, he was always good. I was always a fan of his, and I actually like hanging out with him. I've got nothing against him at all, but I understand if he sees this why he'd want to keep his distance from me. Definitely, I'm not for whatever reason on the WWE's most beloved list. So as he's not going to do anything that's going to affect him getting a paycheck. The crowd was booing the main event of WrestleMania 3. I don't know about that. Was it supposed to be Billy Jack against Macho? That's what Billy Jack says, which I will tell you honestly, Billy Jack Haynes is delusional. And that's not an insult. He's legitimately delusional. He doesn't understand to this day the consequences of his actions with his wife. And there's some. I would love to do an interview with Honky Tonk Man to get his opinion on that. But it's not a funny situation about Billy Jack and his wife. But I remember one of the last conversations I had with a mutual contact was he had sent me a bunch of pictures of him and his wife. And like he had asked this mutual contact, could I send the pictures to him through his lawyer because he misses his wife? It's like, don't you understand what you did and like why you're in jail now? It's just a sad situation with him. He was entertaining. No, Honky Tonk Man, as I said, I think he's under Legends contract. He saved his money well. He lives in Arizona. I think his daughter must have graduated vet school by now because she was in it. She was in it for a long time. I know that. His daughter was good looking when I saw her too, but that was a long time ago. I'm sure his daughter's married now, and I hope his son's doing well. His wife is a hilarious character. There was a he's not going to care about me telling this story, and Samoa Joe could tell you guys this story too. He's not going to care at all about me telling this story because it was in 2008. This is a hilarious story in Calgary, Alberta. I put on a show. It was during Stampede Week. He was there with his family, and yeah, let's just say him and his wife had consumed numerous alcoholic beverages. And again, Samoa Joe, you can ask about this. He was on that card. Jinder Mahal was on that card. Champagne Singh was on that card. And he got on the mic before his match for like half an hour. But it was hilarious. And I believe his wife got on the mic at one point. I wish somebody had taped it. It was absolutely hilarious. And I thought it was great. But this was the days before cell phones. If that had happened, and anyone that was there, this was July 2008, Calgary, Alberta. They can confirm that story. It was wild. And the night before, I was feeling that Stampede wrestling fever. So, or it was during the Calgary Stampede, which is a party atmosphere. So I can't say I wasn't guilty of doing the same thing the night before, but I just didn't do it as publicly. But someone is tipping $4.99. Says, did Honky Tonk Man ever get any broads when I was on the road with him? Looked like a busty blonde was digging. Well, I don't want to get him in any trouble, but I will say that he definitely had women that liked him and were marking out for him. Whenever we go, one of the reasons I like going out with him is because usually we get free drinks, or I used to work in a lot of bars at that time or have contacts in the towns that we would go to. And I'd be like, oh, if I bring the Honky Tonk Man here after, can we get free drinks? And it'd be a good way to get free drinks. And yeah, he was very funny around women, and you can see in some of those videos some of the funny stuff he would do. But did I ever see him cheat on his wife? No, definitely not. Did I see him flirt with girls? Yes. Yeah. He's more of a honestly, he's more of a fun-loving guy. He just wants to go out, flirt with girls, talk to girls, drink beer. No matter where you are with him, he always seems to have a beer on him. That's one of the funniest things about Honky Tonk Man. You could be like in the middle of a forest somewhere in a rundown town where all the alcohol stores are closed, and he'll pull out I think he let Heineken pull out a Heineken from his jacket and shake it and be like, "You want one?" He's a very funny guy, and he is one that like. It's not like he was performing top rope maneuvers and stuff. He was one that wouldn't be shy to have a few drinks before his match, and definitely not after. And he definitely liked the Screech. As there's a lot of stories about Screech, which is a Newfoundland drink that can mess you up really bad, that he got me messed up on before. So yeah, I like him. I found this interview entertaining. He was definitely the kinder, gentler Honky Tonk Man. I'm sure one of these days I'll cross paths with him again. Until then, best wishes to him. Oh, by the way, it's nice to see him and Jake still hate each other. I like seeing that. There's too much friendly crap from people who used to feud in wrestling going on today. And even today's wrestlers that are currently feuding act too nice to each other. I like seeing that him and Jake still, whether kayfabe or not, hate each other to the public. It's awesome.